and I will now pass the baton on to the both of you.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी बहुत कम लोग हैं लेकिन मैं रिक्वेस्ट ये करूंगा कि जो मौजूद हैं वो हमारी तरफ तवज्जो जरूर दें ठीक है So I start we have been invited to talk about Pakistan digital stack. What is Pakistan digital stack? What is Karandas doing? I have with me Shirjeel Murtaza who is director digital financial services. ये हमारे पूरे digital pillar को lead करते हैं which is funded by the Gates Foundation and part funded by the FCDO's Financial Inclusion Program for digitizing SCCP. Just to share with you first what Karandas is doing in the digital space, I think that's important, and then we will come on to Pakistan digital stack. So Karandas digital pillar has installed Rast payment gateway in the State Bank of Pakistan. End to end we have delivered it, alhamdulillah. Then we are digitizing SCCP, Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. We have set up collateral secure transaction registry or collateral registry there. We have completed phase 1 of the company registry. Phase 2 would soon be live, and also we are automating and digitizing their internal process flows. In addition to this, we have very closely worked with the Central Directorate of National Savings and help them digitize their centers. People who have experience of visiting the old Qawmi Bachat centers, वो क्या होता था कि आप register होते थे, खाते होते थे. Now all of that back end पे digitize हो चुका है. Basically it has the capability कि आप किसी भी center में walk in करें तो they would have your, and it is then connected with the ATM cards have been issued. Similarly, we have a very vibrant portfolio where we provide grants to the fintechs or other financial sector institutions who are active in the financial sector space for innovation. And we obviously have a very live research agenda too from Shirjeel's team. We funded the collaboration with the State Bank of Pakistan on the digital banks, based on which now NOCs issued and then the licenses process would commence. So we are active on innovation, on infrastructure support to the regulators, to the state agencies, and also with the private sector. In addition to this, we have just recently signed a memorandum of understanding last week actually with the Ministry of Finance for implementation of Pakistan digital stack. What is Pakistan digital stack? How would it operate? Shirjeel is an expert. I would ask him to speak more in detail. I'll just be kind of helping the discussion. So first, to introduce what Pakistan digital stack is. An easier way to understand is that it is a collection of the open APIs and public good databases, digital databases. So going into further, I think there is a whole concept of layers. Shirjeel, would you like to use a slide or how would you?
Thank you very much.
Your slides are available. So I think अगर आप play कौन play कर रहा है इसको?
I think they were being played previously.
They're coming up.
Yeah.
जी तो अब पहली slide पे अगर चले जाएं तो I think Shirjeel can start speaking and then I'll talk also.
Sure. So Assalamu alaikum everybody, and thank you very much Vikas for a good detailed introduction on our DFS portfolio. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. As Vikas has mentioned, after having deployed the Rast payment system, which is basically an instant payment system in Pakistan, it is only organic, and I would say also the wisest thing to do that we move on with our journey of digital. Yes, when the industry recently started to hear about this initiative that we are going to take up the next layers, which I'll come to in a bit of time, of digital stack, I got some questions through, contacts and various WhatsApp groups where people question that, have we already done enough with the Rast payment system? Why are we moving up to the next phase? So it's a very valid and legit question. No, there's a lot more to be done with Rast. The industry needs to create more use cases. The person to merchant use case, I must mention, which is likely to launch in a very short span of time from now, will be a game changer. So while Rast is making some really good progress, we definitely have to take the opportunity.
Shirjeel, when you say good progress,
yes,
Can you share some high-level numbers?
Sure.
What does it mean? How many IDs? What is the number of transactions
Sure.
per day? Throughput? क्या चल रहा है?
Sure. So, I mean, the biggest indicator is the number of IDs. So we have currently we've crossed the 33 million RAST IDs mark very recently. Now, please keep in context that the documented bank accounts or the known bank accounts in Pakistan are to the tune of 68 to 70 million. We get different figures, but that's the most accurate that we hear about. So there's 33 million IDs. The daily throughput is now topping PKR 20 billion with, a transaction volume of 1 million to 1.1 million. And overall, since launch of RAST, we have just crossed the 4.4 trillion mark very recently. So that's great. And I mean, I would love to go in more details in terms of numbers, but just to avoid boredom, if you compare it, if you get a chance, just compare it to the UPI journey of India, which is like, something to look at. If you look at the numbers that they garnered in the similar amount of time after getting launched, we are actually ahead of them. So the trajectory is really good. But to maintain the momentum, you have to bring in other elements into the ecosystem.
So Shajil, I would just challenge a bit, say कि हमारा ecosystem कैसा है? India के numbers, हमारे इस वक्त numbers हैं 1 million transactions per day. So the number of transactions per day in India is 41 times ours, even if we take into account that their population is 7 times. So their number transactions per day are 286 million per day.
Absolutely.
And if you look at the volume or the throughput which is happening, $5.6 billion per day is being transacted in India per day. $5.6 billion per day.
Yes.
And there are 67 billion digital ID verifications which exist, or data points which exist in India. So, when we talk about Pakistan digital stack, there we have only RAST, but where the digital stack has been fully developed, that's the ecosystem we are talking about, that it would create for the digital economy.
Absolutely. I think with those numbers, you've actually helped me build the case for the Pakistan digital stack that was going to come in a minute. So these numbers are obviously after a very long journey, over a decade. However, these numbers would have definitely stagnated at much lower levels if it was just a payment system. This is how India has been successful, and not just India. I would like to quote here this examples of Singapore, Estonia, and other economies as well. Wherever the full stack has been deployed, obviously it doesn't happen in one hit, it happens gradually. The ecosystem keeps on growing. And the impact is eventually, it comes through at similar scale. So coming back to the Pakistan stack, what is it really? Technically, you can just think of it as a number of rails or number of channels to basically create an interoperable, fully connected digital ecosystem, not only for public sector, not only for private sector, but also for individuals to directly participate. Making it a bit more simpler, we already have one of the layers, which is the payments layer. What's next? We need to have a digital identity, and then we also need to have a data exchange layer. A very frequent question that I get is, we already have a digital identity. Our ID cards are digital. That is a bit of a misconception. What we have is a digitized identity, and there is a huge difference between a digital identity and a digitized identity. SingPass, again, quoting the example of Singapore, is a true form of digital identity. Similarly, Aadhaar card is a true form of digital identity. However, great news is, we have this huge advantage of embarking on this journey, because all these success stories, if you talk to the lead architect of the SingPass, or if you talk to the lead architect of the Estonian digital revolution, they will tell you that the biggest ingredient that they had was an existing digital identity database, which we also have in the form of Nadra. Whereas UK has been trying the same thing for the last 8 years, and they call it a failed project. Because the original budget, I think, was around £60 million. They've ended up spending over 500 as we speak. It was supposed to finish in 3 years. They're at the 8th year and they still haven't finished. Why? Because they did not have an equivalent of a NADRA when they started off. They were using a range of IDs. So we are very well set to move into the digital identity space, which will enable people to authenticate and verify them on the spot, real time, even online. Because digital identities come with dual signatures, they have your identification credentials, they have your biometrics, and they can even have your iris scans like Aadhaar card. So you do not have to be present to get onboarded onto a service, to buy something, to buy a telephone SIM card, to open a bank account. You can do it all online because it's all interconnected. And the third layer is the data exchange. As the name says, in Pakistan, all experts say, we know that we have a lot of sources of data, but they're all in isolation. Nobody wants to share the data. Everybody is, holding tight to that. So a data exchange layer is essentially a mediation layer in the middle, anchored by, an autonomous body or a government-owned body to which every public and private sector entity can connect based on rules and regulations, and they can access data real time. Biggest advantage, creates an instant footprint of the entire citizen base.
Shajil, aapko example denge? For example, when you say that any government department would be able to connect to this data exchange layer, what does it mean? What does it mean for, say, a business entity which wants access to that database of a public entity? What does it mean?
Sure. So it's not just public entities. So from a public entity perspective, a great candidate would be FBR, a very tough one to crack, but yes, that needs to come on board. Revenue departments, land records. We know land records are already digitalized, but still they're in their own isolation. Why not connect to this? But from a private sector perspective, the telco data, the utilities companies, discos, where bill payments are made, all little payments, transactions that take place through any public or private sector database can be connected to this. Again, just for clarity, a lot of times I get this question, nobody would be willing to give their data to you. The exchange does not need anyone's data. The exchange just facilitates the access. Nobody knows where the data is coming from.
So, आसान जुबान में कहें तो basically एक protocol या infrastructure exist करता होगा, जिसके एक end पे data reside करता है, और दूसरे पे जो user access करना चाह रहे हैं और जिसके लिए access किया जा रहा है वो consent देगा.
जी बिल्कुल.
ऐसा तो नहीं है कि मतलब मेरा डेटा अगर एग्जिस्ट करता है, ऐसे सीडीए के अंदर मेरा कोई डेटा है या टेलको का डेटा है, तो थर्ड पार्टी would be able to access that without my knowing that.
No, absolutely not. So with the digital identity, you get the digital consent layer or the authorization layer as well. We keep on using the word layer because just to call out the channels. You also get a digital locker, where you get to store your very personal credentials, like your educational documents, for example, your medical history, if you want to. Because in many cases, if you're, for example, going to sign up for an insurance cover-up, health cover lene jate hain, they will instantly ask you, can you give me your health history for last 3 years? If you have a digital identity associated with a digital locker, your credentials or your records are there, you authorize to release those records to that specific general physician or doctor, whoever that is. And they can use that to...
So within consent, there are several levels.
Yes.
आप जितना release करना चाहते हैं, आप उतनी की authorization देंगे.
Absolutely.
और that जिसके लिए करना चाहते हैं,
जिसके लिए करना चाहते हैं, on the spot वो उसको available होगा. They make an instant decision, and similarly goes for payments. Right now, we are talking about RASP being there and the request to pay more coming through very soon. But there's more to request to pay. There has to be the consent of releasing payments through this digital identity layer and data exchange existent and interconnected with the payments layer. All these things come to you over digital channels. Okay.
So I would request to move to second slide. I think थोड़ी सी ज़रा technical हो जाएगी, but it's good to explain. You have nothing more to explain on this slide, right?
Yes. So we have pretty much covered.
Second slide पे चलते हैं जी ज़रा. जी. So, Sharjeel.
जी. So this is basically I've tried to I've got it on my phone. So I've tried to make this one a bit simple for business level people as well. Essentially, this shows you the layout, how this Pakistan digital stack would eventually look up, appear to be. So on one side, we have digitized government. And it can also include private sector, of course, but we are focusing on the government just of yet because there's a lot to do in that space. Then you have the instant payment system sitting in the middle, which we have, it's existing. On the other side, you have a combo which actually creates the overall digital identity. So one is the locker, which I talked about, and the other is the verification or the consent layer, which was very rightly pointed out by Vikas. It's very important. You cannot just leave your data out there for anybody to use anytime without your consent. Essentially, when you have these infrastructure, digital public infrastructure layers deployed, they get connected to the bottom part of the slide where all your stakeholders are. You can see a farmer in there, you can see payments use cases, private entities and whatnot, health services. Obviously, there's also the public sector where, all the public sector data resides. So all of this then gets connected through a central layer, which we call as the data exchange, which is essentially a number of open source, open loop APIs for everyone to connect to and use. Again, I would call out there are rules and regulations to be set around it. It's not like free for anybody and anybody can use it for any purpose. You can put in a lot of regulations and rules to contain the usage. For example, a specific industry segment can only access information or data of that industry segment. Everybody cannot access anybody's, for example, tax records. So you set the rules. So this is the general layout of how the whole stack would be laid out and how it operates, with the actual beneficiaries and the stakeholders at the bottom.
So with this explained, Shirjeel, I would say that what does it mean for people and businesses? So I think the word that is used is use cases, right?
Yes.
तो आप जरा explain करते हैं कि use cases कौन से हैं, which market can see once this Pakistan digital stack is in place.
Sure. So if you can please go to the next slide, that has the most critical use cases that we have identified so far. There you go. So if you look on the left-hand side, it clearly says the use cases, the relevant use cases for individuals, and on the right-hand side, it's for the entities, whether public or private. So digital identity is the key use case here. You should be able to verify yourself or prove your identity real-time, anywhere, physically or non-physically on a virtual front as well. So that's the biggest use case. Then it's the digital signing, the authorization or the consent. If you want to be onboarded, you have to issue documents. You don't have to go to notary public to get your records, validated by a notary public and then go back to the service provider, provide it to them and they validate it somehow and then you go through the cycle. It's all digital. It helps you get to what you want to get to in a pretty much instant way. Similarly, on the right-hand side, if you talk about the public and private sector entities, business APIs, everybody can talk to everybody in their own specific segment or even beyond that. There's a lot of data stored with, I will give an example of manufacturers, data in terms of where the inputs are coming from, where they are getting best prices. Yes, it's a competitive edge, but in countries like Germany, I was reading recently a research paper, the manufacturing segment actually shares data. 82% was the number. 82% of manufacturing entities in Germany actually share data with each other regarding their supply chains, from where are they getting their raw materials, at what prices, so that everybody can actually get the best price. Similarly, they even share their stock details because they're not shy of being in a situation, if I'm a manufacturer and I have low stocks, but I have a bigger order coming through, I will probably leverage your stock, which is in abundance. I will still make money and you will still make money, of course.
I just give you one example. Karandas is invested in many sectors. One of the sectors we are invested in is poultry. So the major issue which is being faced right now in poultry sector is the farmers are not able to pass on the input price. आपको अंडा या वो महंगा मिल रहा है, but दरमियान में trader बैठा है which is making a lot of margins. And actually industry is going through crisis, serious crisis. Plants are being shut down and all of that वो सारा मसला है. लेकिन अगर आप ये पूछें कि ओवर प्रोडक्शन है कि नहीं है, nobody can tell even in the industry कि इस वक्त status of production क्या है. I've spoken to industry experts, farmers, कोई किसी को ये नहीं पता कि जिसको कहते हैं अपनी जुबान में अंडा और चूजा कितना है जो प्रोड्यूस हो रहा है, ये अगले महीने कितना होगा उसे। तो वो जो डिमांड सप्लाई का गैप है इस वक्त इट्स मोर लाइक ए गैम्बलिंग और बेटिंग चल रही है कि अगर अब बहुत लोग बंद हो गए हैं, डाल दो, जब फ्लॉक निकलेगा तो इसकी ये प्राइस कमांड करेगा। एंड इफ यू कंपेयर इट विद डेवलप्ड जुरिस्डिक्शंस, वहां पे स्टैटिस्टिक्स डिपार्टमेंट्स ये डेटा कलेक्ट करते हैं, उसकी बेसिस पे पॉलिसी, उसकी बेसिस पे लाइसेंसिंग होती है। So if they know that there is over investment going into this sector, then they control that. In Pakistan, एक सेक्टर जो अच्छा काम कर रहा था, even वहाँ पे भी ये बहुत ज़्यादा स्टार्ट हो गया है कि people are now shying away, and you know that then affects service or product affordability for the consumer. So I'm just given an outrageous example so that you can understand कि जब ये databases combine हो जाएंगे और बिजनेसेस में पेमेंट्स कंबाइन हो जाएंगी, तो गवर्नमेंट की विजिबिलिटी या इवन बिजनेस की अपनी विजिबिलिटी टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स आर परफॉर्मिंग वुड एनहांस। नाउ कमिंग टू दिस, देखें माइक्रो फाइनेंस की हमारी ये वर्ड है, आप जरा एक्सप्लेन करते हैं। ऑब्वियसली व्हेन द इकोनॉमी बिकम्स डिजिटलाइज्ड एंड इन द डिजिटल इकोनॉमी देयर आर डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ बिजनेसेस व्हिच कैन इमर्ज, इवन द एग्जिस्टिंग बिजनेस मॉडल्स वुड बी अफेक्टेड बाय इट। So I would request that if you can speak about what would be the impact on the overall economy and how would all this be related to, say, micro businesses?
Sure. So a very prudent question, and
last slide
that is a huge interest to us, all of us as a country as well. So again, with
आप last slide पे चले जाएं.
With microfinance experts sitting here, I'm sure अगर हम यहाँ पे सवाल पूछें तो everybody will say the same thing, that the first or the topmost biggest challenge in this industry is to who to finance. You know, you cannot just finance everybody, because the credit rating or the lack of it, we have some very good startups coming through, but still we are way behind. The institutes are not willing to take an extra level of risk, and why should they? They're commercial entities. With the digital stack being implemented, it gives all industry players a very good opportunity to make better assessments based on the database actually out there even as we speak. I mean, if I walk in, I'm an unbanked or a totally undocumented person, but I still might have a bijli ka meter at home in my name, जिसके मैं bills pay करता हूँ. I might have a SIM in my name. मेरे पास हो सकता है मेरी सैलरी भी एक आती हो, लेकिन मैं शायद कैश में लेता हूँ, कुछ मैं शायद अकाउंट में लेता हूँ. If you combine these three credentials as visibility, I am sure कि जो microfinance lending के लोग बैठे हैं, अगर मैं personal capacity में बात करूँ individual loans में, they would see that as a footprint to at least make a better call. Otherwise, without that visibility, I am no one. I do not have any footprint to be looked at. So, जो access to finance है with such visibility which comes through the stack, that definitely increases. That has been the case around the world. The cost of business goes down. So I mean, as an example, 2019 या 20 के अंदर McKinsey ने एक report की थी on the same advantages of digital stack, and they estimated that the contribution, you know, or the value generation in a GDP is 3 to 6% just because of, you know, digitalized economy. And when they say digitalized economy, they're talking nothing beyond these three layers. Canada is an example. वहाँ पे ये number lower है, but it's still around 1.5%. And what are the key factors? Key factors are reduced costs. How do you reduce costs? It's not just the transaction, it's also the fraud. The fraud reduction plays a big role in reducing the cost of actual financing. Due to visibility, there are higher sales, there are higher revenues. All these things add up for the micro businesses as well as microfinancing entities, because they get a bigger ecosystem to finance, to engross.
So there are analytics for the lender, for the investor.
Yes.
There are analytics for the business itself available that they can avail of. There is traceability of the transactions. There is more predictability and assurance of the transactions, much less fraud. And then obviously the velocity of money increases, and, you know, bank multiplier and all of that comes into effect, which results. So all of these combined create an effect on the GDP growth.
GDP growth, absolutely.
चलें, so thank you very much. So जो time हमें allotted था, we have tried to explain. It is futuristic. We would now, as Karandas, as entity, availing of the Gates funding, be scoping this Pakistan digital stack. and then engaging with the state agencies as well as with the industry on how to implement that. I think there will be some select consultation process as well too, which would be involved. Good thing is that we are not the first one in the world who are doing it. You know, just neighbors in India who have done that, and there are other economies too in which it has happened. So there is international expertise and experience available in this, but this is we are fortunate that we would have, inshallah, grant funding available to do it. Suggestions would be welcome, and let's see how all of this journey unfolds. I feel a bit that आज से 5-6 साल पहले जब हमने रास स्टार्ट किया था, तो तब भी एक उसके मतलब एक क्वेश्चन था कि पता नहीं ये क्या होगा, क्या करेगा, कैसे करेगा. But now we are starting this Pakistan digital stack, building on the RAS success. I think there will be high points for the industry as well as for the overall economy of the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciation for your participation. Can I please ask Mudassir Saab to come on stage to hand the first memento to Mr. Waqas Al Hassan? We have another one for Shajil. Can you please, and then one for Shajil Saab, please. Thank you so much. And this conversation, of course, really tied in with our conversations, as I was mentioning yesterday, where we were talking about outreach and we were talking about using digital to increase financial inclusion. And we have a specialist for this also in our next panel, which I will quickly introduce to the audience. So the next panel is slightly different in its format. And what we're really hoping to do via this panel is have all of you, our August audience, as the panelists. So what we're going to do is that I'm just going to introduce the format of the panel discussion. And then I'll call the session chair on the stage who will do the scene setting. And then I'll ask the specialists that we have for each smaller breakout group that we want to divide into to go to the breakout groups that we've set out. So the next panel is achieving the SDGs through microfinance. So we want to look at the nexus between achieving the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN set out and how microfinance can contribute to that. So what we're going to do is that we have 6 experts with us today. We have a gender specialist, we have a low-cost housing specialist, we have an education finance specialist, a nano-lending specialist, an insurance specialist, and a digital finance specialist. They all have been assigned specific sustainable development goals, and they will be taking audience members to the different groups that we have over there that are clearly marked. All of you have the option of going to the group that interests you the most or the SDG that interests you the most. What we'll do is that I'll start with inviting our session chair for this session, which is Ms. Amara Durrani, who is the Assistant Resident Representative and the Chief of the Development Policy Unit at UNDP Pakistan. Ms. Amara, of course, is a seasoned public policy professional with over 23 years of experience in diverse subjects such as preventing violence, peace building, sustainable development, and gender. And we will ask her to come on stage to do the scene setting. As I mentioned, after she has done the scene setting, I will introduce the experts that we have for each of the SGDs and the SDGs that they are looking at, and then I will request the audience to go there. Would you like to speak here, or would you like to sit and speak? All right. So just a tad bit of a change in plan. So I'm going to also invite all of our specialists on stage right now, and then we can go from there. So I'll start off with calling our gender specialist, which is Ms. Sadaf Abid, who is the founder and CEO of Circle. Sadaf, of course, is an ardent advocate of financial inclusion for women and economic empowerment of women. At Circle, she's championing digital and financial inclusion for women. Formerly, Sadaf was the CEO of Kash Foundation, Pakistan's first specialized women-centric microfinance organization. And the SDG that someone will be speaking about, or sorry, that Sadaf will be tackling is SDG 5, which is on gender equality. Our next expert is Mr. Mudassir Hussain Khan, who is the low-cost housing specialist. He is the managing director and CEO of the Pakistan Mortgage Refinance Company. Mudassir Saab, of course, has over 30 years of diverse banking experience, including leadership roles at the NBP and HBL. Mudassir Saab is a great advocate for housing finance in Pakistan and has spent a greater part of the last decade trying to do refinancing of mortgages in Pakistan. Of course, relevant to his area of expertise, he has been assigned SDG 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities. So all of you who are interested in this SDG will move on to the table that says SDG 11. All right. Next up, we will call the Education Finance Specialist, which is Mr. Kamran Nazim, who is the CEO of Talim Finance Company. Kamran Saab, of course, came to the development sector, or what we call the right side, from a career in chartered accountancy 2 decades back. He was instrumental in setting up Pakistan's first specialized education finance company, who is now the CEO of. Prior to this, he was the CEO of Kash Foundation. Kamran Saab will be dealing with SDG 4, which is on quality education. We have just also received note that we have another gender expert with us from JICA, Ms. Naji. I would also... Okay, so it's Ms. Nazia Seher, who is a senior program officer at JICA. Could you please also join us on stage? She will, of course, also be looking at the same SDG that Sadaf is dealing with, which is SDG 5. Then we have in the house a nano lending specialist, which is Mr. Muhammad Abrar Amin, who is the MD and CEO of StreetCred Financial Services. StreetCred is the 3rd largest digital lender in Pakistan, with over 3.7 million loans, which have been dispersed which have been dispersed through over 37 billion rupees. Prior to this, Mr. Abrar worked with the IFC, the World Bank, and Bank Al-Falah. The SDG that he will be dealing with is SDG 1, which is creating a world without poverty. Next up, I'd like to call on stage Mr. Zainul Haq Qureshi, who is the CEO of Asia Insurance. Of course, Zain is our insurance finance specialist. Zain, as we also heard yesterday, has over 12 years of experience in multiple facets of insurance work. At Asia Insurance, he's been leading from the front to create impact through digitization and expansion in product offerings. The SDG that Zain and his group will be dealing with is SDG 13, which is on climate action. Lastly, we have with us Mr. Murtaza Ali, who is our digital finance specialist. He is the head of JazzCash. He, of course, brings to the panel a mix of telco, finance, and credit experience prior to his role at JazzCash. He actually was leading the integration of Pakistan's biggest mobile money program, Easy Paisa, into Telenor Microfinance Bank, where he worked as CFO. It's a pleasure to have us with you, sir. Could you please join us on stage? The SDG that Murtaza Saab will be dealing with is SDG 9, which is industry and innovation. And now I'd like to hand over the baton to Ms. Amara, who will set the scene, and post that the specialists will go to the tables. We would also like you to join us on the relevant themes that interest you.
Thank you very much to my young colleague for a wonderful introduction. For myself as well as for all the esteemed panelists. I'm very privileged to be part of such a diverse, dynamic, thoughtful, and accomplished set of panelists today. My congratulations to the Pakistan Microfinance Network for organizing this forum. And I must commend the organizers for designing this session quite creatively. I really look forward to listening more rather than speaking more. But let me just say a few pointers on behalf of the United Nations Development Program Agency of the UN system, which is also the facilitated agency in the UN on the SDGs. We see ourselves as a UN agency that brings together all the other UN agencies as well as our counterparts in the government, in the private sector, in civil society, communities, etc., to integrate all of our respective work around the SDGs. I'm assuming, looking at our esteemed guests here, that this is already a very informed gathering. And I'm assuming that everybody knows what SDGs is. It is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that all the member states of the United Nations have signed up for, including Pakistan, with very specific targets and goals to be achieved by 2030. Now, let me say at the outset that because of a very complicated, complex, global situation, which has been on the receiving end of a number of back-to-back crises in the last few years, COVID, energy, fuel crises, inflation crises, which is not just specific to Pakistan, but it is a global phenomenon, plus conflict in Europe, in Ukraine, and we are seeing more and more instability in several other regions. All of these have a cumulative impact on macroeconomic and financial context of every country, including Pakistan, and that in itself creates automatic pressures on countries, governments, and partners to achieve the SDGs. Just this summer, in 2023, in September actually, the UN convened the annual General Assembly session. On the sidelines of the General Assembly session, which Pakistan was also represented by the Honorable Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, the UN also convened with member states the SDGs Summit, a mid-mile review of where countries are on the SDGs. We have just 9 more years to go. This is the last decade of action, to review how countries are doing. The track record is not encouraging for all the countries because of the crises that I've just outlined. But I have to say, as a staff of the UNDP in Pakistan, Pakistan's indicators on SDGs are particularly of concern, especially when we compare them to the indicators of neighboring countries in the region, in the Asia-Pacific region. And that includes actually sanctioned countries like Iran. So the Human Development Index score of countries like Iran is in the double digits, whereas for Pakistan, the Human Development Index, which by the way has remained stagnant for the last 3 years or so, is in the 3 digits. There are other countries, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. The human development indicators of these countries, and of course the SDGs are measured against the human development indicators. Pakistan's scoring and targets are doing relatively low. So I think one of the pointers that I would request for the panelists is to see what is it that some of the regional countries are doing that perhaps Pakistan may pay attention to for lessons learned, etc., and how we can focus. The other thing that I would like to put forward for the consideration of my esteemed colleagues is that last year the UN Secretary General launched what we call the SDG Stimulus Plan. It is a critical review, and by the way, this is the United Nations position of the Secretary General as well as that of the UNDP Administrator, Mr. Achim Steiner, that because of the crises that I've just outlined, the international financial system seems to be lagging behind in responding to, in addressing, and in actively supporting the vulnerable communities. That perhaps the international financial system is no longer fit for purpose. Perhaps business as usual approaches and methodologies may no longer work if countries have to achieve the SDGs. So how are existing financial institutions, whether it is international financial institutions, international multilateral banks, or domestic commercial banks and national development banks, what is the current structure? What are the current mechanisms? And how can they be perhaps reviewed and refreshed and realigned to meet the actual needs on the ground to support communities and governments to achieve the SDGs? The Secretary General's stimulus plan outlines a number of robust measures for that. At the SDG summit that I just referred to, 95 countries of the world presented their SDGs Insights reports. On behalf of the government of Pakistan and Pakistan UNDP also presented the Pakistan report in September for the SDG Insights. I would encourage all of you to look it up. It is readily available on global platforms, and I'm happy to guide you to access that report. The Pakistan Insights report very succinctly identifies certain priorities that when we review the Pakistan as well as governmental as well as non-governmental policy documents, we automatically see that within the country there is a bit of a clarity on what the priorities ought to be for the next 9 years. And I'm just going to quickly share with you that those priorities are quite aligned, I must say, to the sectors that all the panelists are here for today. There are about 5 priorities that the Pakistan report identifies, and these are all part of the SDGs targets and groups. Implementation of the social protection systems, especially women and vulnerable communities, sustainable economic growth, sustainable, resilient, and inclusive infrastructure. By the way, infrastructure also includes digital infrastructure. Safe and affordable housing, and effective, accountable, and transparent institutions. So if you look at these priorities, which our report has yielded, you will automatically begin to create the synergies alignments that I believe the panelists will be speaking to in their respective remarks. So I think the glass is half full for Pakistan. This forum, in my view, has those leaders and those thought leaders, those practice leaders, including our esteemed panelists, who really are on the front lines of practice and action and experience. And I hope that this session will generate some excellent food for thought and a will, a collective will on pushing the envelope, pushing the policy envelope on how we can critically review our own approaches and kind of push ourselves for going out and doing something innovative to maximize the impact that Pakistan can generate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Amara. So as I discussed before the start of the session, this is a breakout session. So I'd request all of our experts to go to the tables that are clearly marked over there with their SDG and their area of expertise. What I'd also like to request all of the audience members to do is to, sort of go towards that area and see the table that is of most interest to them so that they can now be part of that. So, and then what we'll do is we'll have a 25 to 30-minute deliberation in the groups, after which our experts will come and do a 5-minute debrief on what was the discussion in their group. So if I could please request you to move to your tables. Thank you. So I would request all the audience members that have not moved to tables to please move to the tables. We are a bit short on people on the InsurTech and the nano lending and digital finance. So if you could, if I could push you to please move to those tables. Salar, the group that you're talking to, could you please ask them to move to the other side also? Thank you. And I see some people in the back also not moving. So could you please move to the SDGs? Can I also encourage some more people to please go to the gender table, because we only seem to have the Chief Risk Officer for Kashf at the gender table. Musharraf Saab, can I please request you to join the gender table, given Daman's work? Thank you. Also, I see a table that someone is standing next to that is not moving to a, yes. ठीक है. So Mumtaz Saab, can I request you to move to the InsurTech table, please? Because we're running short on people on the InsurTech. Thilan Saab, आप भी अगर InsurTech पे आ जाएं. Our friends from Daman, if I could also please request you to move towards the tables. Like I said, we're running a bit low on numbers on the insurance table. Mumtaz Saab, if you could ask your table to please go to the insurance table.
Check.
All right, so we did a quick round of the tables and we saw that everybody's just sort of summing up. So if we could request the groups that are ready to present, for the group members to maybe go back to their seats and for the session chairs, breakaway session chairs to join us on stage. I like how the discussion is so sort of involved and invigorating that it's going on. There's never enough time for such discussions. I think we could be here all day and we'd still have more to discuss. So, thank you, Kamran Saab, for wrapping up. Can we please have you on stage also? Ji Mudassir Saab, can we request you to come on stage, please? अब हमने एक ग्रुप में मुदस्सिर साहब को और डॉक्टर सोनू को डाल दिया है तो ये डिस्कशन तो लंबी ही चलेगी बट आई प्लीज रिक्वेस्ट यू टू सम अप कम ऑन स्टेज एंड सम अप can I also request the co-chairs of the gender group, Sadaf and Nazia, to please come on stage? Abrar Saab, can I please request you to come on stage? Thank you. Sadaf, it might be nice if, Sadaf, it might be nice if, Sadaf, it might be nice if the both of you could sit together. Okay, thanks. So do we have everyone? Do we have extra chairs?
Without further ado, let's hear what our panelists have to share. May I start with the gender group? Ms. Sadaf of Circle, I believe you also have a co-panelist, so over to you, Sadaf.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to summarize quickly because I had no chance to do a summary. But we had a very engaging conversation. We actually also worked hard at pulling people into our group, and one of the trends we noticed was that it was fascinating because we're talking about financial inclusion, but initially there was very low interest in gender. So we had to actually attract people. And we did end up with 3 men, and we appreciated having the 3 men as partners. Thank you. But I think the message is, if you want to bring the issue of gender in the center, you kind of have to work hard. Because while we all talk about it, but are we really doing concrete steps and driving it? We have to ask ourselves those tough questions. So the group talked about one, focus on skills, because what we find is investment in women's skills is low. So that is why they tend to be in the informal sector. So investment in skills, let's do a mapping of which are the vocational centers. We must bring technology into all of this because technology is a great enabler, it's an equalizer. But we know this, that women's access to internet and digital literacy is very limited. Pakistan has one of the widest digital gender divides. What does this mean? Even if a woman has a smartphone, she doesn't know how to use it. She is